People win lotteries in their life, and having a great set of parents is the biggest lottery one can win. There is always something that society makes you feel like you're not doing good enough. You can always force a child, and my parents were like, we don't do that. You knew what you wanted, and we wanted to support you. Nothing is worth having a bad relationship. I can be pretty strict. Like, there is no iPad in my house on the weekday. Like, it's just not happening, right? But on what they do in their free time, just a little bit let them choose and follow. He said, I think you should work. You should be your person even after not for the money, just because it was so much a part of my identity. When you're 30, it doesn't matter whether you graduated 1 year earlier.
Hello everyone. Today we're joined by Manisha Shah. Manisha is the mother of one daughter, 8 years old. Hello Manisha.
Hi, Lynn.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, New World Saigon Hotel, for sponsoring the location for today's episode. So I remember a coffee chat we had, and I remember I was really concerned about how do I get my daughter to like me, right? Because I feel like, of course, she loves me. I take care of her, we spend time together, but I don't know if she likes me as a person, right? Yeah, I remember a piece of advice you gave me, and you said, just play with her. Right? And I was like, is that it? That's simple? And you started telling me about your dad. And I love hearing that because I feel like you had a great role model. Right? You know how to be a great mom because you had great parents. So why don't we start with that? Can you tell me about your mom and dad?
Yeah, sure. I have to say, I think that people win lotteries in their life, and having a great set of parents is the biggest lottery one can win. There's nothing better than that, and my parents are great. I think they're perfect, which is not to say we didn't fight growing up, we don't disagree on stuff, but overall, they really influenced me. My dad and mom, they grew up in India, then they lived in the US for a long time, and when we were really young, they moved, as you know, back to Bombay, and we grew up. And we grew up in a normal Indian house, but our upbringing was kind of common for the people that I grew up around in Bombay, but it's not a very traditional upbringing, very conservative upbringing. So, boys and girls were treated the same. There were no rules about what you can wear and what you cannot wear. And I think the voices of all children in our family were always heard, and they were always respected. So everyone found a voice, The thing about being loved and liked, I think that's huge because, you always love your parents, right? But in my case, like if you like them, you like hanging out with them. So you want to go on vacation with your parents. And it wasn't just me, like it was like all my friends, my girlfriends have done holidays with my parents, and they visit my parents, like even though I'm not there.
So what did they do? Like what did they do to make you want to hang out with them?
Sure. I like to just say they're great, but I think that they spend time with us and they listen to us. It's not always interesting, right? And the subjects could be small or big. They did all the parenting jobs. My mother worked part-time, and she was also, we had some help, but not a lot of help at home. And so she had to cook for a lot of people. And she was real busy, but they always found time to spend time with us, to play games, to read together, to do family activities. I remember my dad taught us to ride a bike. When my mom was in the kitchen, we would go, and then more specific, Lego or all the same books that we read. And, when we had an interest, there were times where I never wanted to become a CFO, right? I wanted to be a gymnast, a tennis player, a historian. I did like deep religious studies. And anytime we liked it, they kind of followed along our interest. So they either knew something about the subject, and sometimes they didn't, but they followed along and created a space where we could learn together and follow that interest. And so that's really nice for anyone, right? And so I think that created a lot of bonds. It was just a lot of time.
A lot of parents stay home, or a lot of moms stay home with their children. So if you talk about just time, a lot of moms do spend a lot of time with their children, right? But it's time spent cooking and cleaning and telling the kids to go wash your face and wash your hands, right? It's not quality time, right? So of the amount of time that you spend with your parents, how much of it would you say was quality? How much is required for them to sit there and actually play with you, or just simply be in the room?
So my mom did all of that. She did. She was a pretty hands-on mom. I don't think it's that much time. It's some time, a few times a day. You have to be intentional about what you do with your child. And when you're intentional, you're like, well, okay, she likes this. Let's spend half an hour. You see me drawing. You come and join me and teach me how to draw something else. I think it was a lot of those activities. There were certain constants, like, when we were little, my dad used to work pretty long hours, but usually he came home around bedtime and he'd always tell us a story. My sister and me would be like on beds next to each other, and my dad sits in the center, and he would make up these stories about, it was called Rakrutodi, but there was this imaginary spaceship with R2-D2 because he's a Star Wars fan, and they would go on adventures all over the world, and he would weave in stories like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. We would go under the sea, we would go to some strange planet, we would go to a forest in the middle of Africa. So that was a ritual. I think my mom was always that time between, she would usually come home at half an hour after we came back, and she'd spend an hour or two with us, usually following our activity. So I think for a lot of the things, my dad got to do, I would say, more of the fun things. My mom did like the shepherding between classes, making sure that, there's the right food on the table in front of us. So she did more of that. But she also, like, when the interests collide, like if she was making a cake for me, we would do it together. And that would be the together part. And there wasn't much TV in my house, and they weren't distracted by other things. Mm-hmm. So when they had time, they spent it together. When we went, the family vacation, it wasn't very long, but that was very specific. Usually it was the four of us, and often we'd go to the hills, like Dalat, like a hill station close by, and we would do like horse riding for the kids, but then we used to play a lot of cards, like the games leading up to bridge. We would play chess, and my mom would also do those kind of games with us. So things like that. Lego was a big thing in our family. But it's not a lot of time.
Yeah.
It's just doing what the child likes, not necessarily what. Now I realize, I thought they were doing what they wanted to do, but they were clearly doing what I wanted to do.
And you have to kind of act like you like it.
I think they kind of liked it. I don't think they disliked it. We were playing card games that they taught us. Mm-hmm. And if there was, some running around game that they were physically not able to do, they weren't participating in that. But yes, they put an effort to connect kind of what they like and what we loved, and make that the activity.
I think that was one of the lessons I took away from our conversation. So yesterday, I had a full day of meetings. I couldn't be home. And so I had a call with my older daughter, she's 8, on a video call, just to kind of say hi before the next event. Yeah. And I get on the call, and the same questions. How was school? What's good today? And she didn't really want to talk. Yeah. And then she started doing, to the camera. Yeah. I'm like, are you looking at yourself on the camera? Yes. And they just love doing that. So in my head, I'm like, I have a choice. I can get angry and say, Mommy only has 15 minutes to talk to you. Why aren't you talking to me? Or I can also make faces back at her. And then, so we just start doing faces. And
then it becomes fun as well, right? If you leave aside that, you park that expectation that you bring in the call that, I want to learn about what you did, and instead say that you're here in this moment. Yes. Let's enjoy that moment.
Yeah, what do you want to do? Yeah. And she started doing emojis, so then I do emojis. And then she's like, oh, okay, let's make a face like this emoji. And both of us are like, like the emoji, and then you screenshot, you send pictures, and that was 15 minutes. And I feel like things like that is exactly what you mean, right? It's like you make time for each other, but you kind of let the child take the lead. Yeah, and then you try to enjoy it, right? If I had to choose, if I'm talking to you, I'm definitely not going to be emojiing each other. But if she wants to do that, then that's
And then sometimes there's like 2-3 minutes of emojis, and you can kind of get back to the main conversation as well, right?
So let's talk about discipline, right? A parent tries to be both a parent and a mom, right? How do you separate the two? How do you, on one hand, get down to her level and do emojis, and then on the other hand, say, you can do this and you cannot do that?
I guess that's a good question. I think, having basic, I rarely make Sonali do something that I wouldn't be putting on myself, right? I mean, obviously, she sleeps earlier than I do, but I think that we lead a pretty disciplined life at home. And that's just the way we live in our family.
So you've got, you spend time with the children as much as you can.
Yeah.
But you're also CFO of a major company here in Vietnam.
Yes.
How do you balance that? Like, how do you spend enough time with them? Do you feel guilty that you don't have more time with the children? Or with your daughter?
With my daughter, with Sonali. So I think all women and all mothers, whether you are working, not working, half working, full-time housewife with 5 maids, all of them feel guilty about something. And I don't know why, but there is always something that society makes you feel like you're not doing good enough, right? And I think that nothing good comes out of that feeling.
The standard mom emotion, right?
Yeah,
Guilt.
and so when I kind of a few years ago, in my 40s, 3-4 years ago, I realized that I'm going to stop being guilty. It doesn't always work.
So you just turn it off?
Well, I'm going to try to remind myself to be glad and to be grateful. I'm glad and grateful that I have this amazing daughter. More than guilt, I want to spend time with her. She's fun. And I want to spend time with her because I'm also happy that I have this amazing job where I think I make a difference. I love it. It allows me to support my family. It allows me to be, I think, a good role model for my daughter should she choose to work later on in life. And yeah, it comes with the fact that you can't always be there. But for me, that works. And so you have to constantly, I think, remind yourself because, there's always that school play. We are in a situation where we are pretty senior in our careers. So we control our timetable a lot. The more younger people, they don't, right? They don't get a say. And if you're an office worker in a bank, you got to go when you got to go, right? So you can't control it. And then you have to accept it. But there's always a school play you can't go for or something or the other. And you feel guilty. But what helps, I think, in addition to recognizing that guilt is not helping anyone, it's not helping your child, it's not helping you, is to have a little bit of an ecosystem of support, to have a friend like you or other friends who've, have had great careers and, have kids. And I think that they're doing a great job, right?
Well, you try. You hope so.
Yeah, but I have so many. It's not just you, right? And they support you when you feel rubbish about it, right? And I have a partner who wanted me to work. My in-laws and my parents are super supportive. And then I have the other side, right? Is I have friends here who are, friends of, Sonali's friends' moms. And they always welcomed her. They didn't care that when she was 2, I sent Sonali with the nanny as opposed to with me. They always welcomed her. They supported her. And they don't make me feel guilty for not being there. They support me and they support my child. So I think that you have to kind of build that ecosystem for yourself so that when you go down those dark holes of feeling like you're not doing a good job, they'll pull you out of it.
It's like you build the solution or what you think is the solution.
Well, what works for you?
But then what is enough? Do you know what I mean? What works for you is what determines it is how many hours you actually spend with your children, right? So what time do you get home? Do you actually spend time with them during the week or is it only on weekends? And on weekends, do they have activities? Are you kind of shuttling them around place to place to place?
So the last thing I would say is the thing that I used to always want to do is to explain to people. I'm a working mother, so I can't do this. My daughter's here, explain to somebody why I'm not attending something. Don't have to explain. They don't understand what you are going through. Just like I don't understand what a stay-at-home mom is going. I don't need. So I think that we always try to explain. Of course, you have to explain to your child or your spouse or your boss, right? But for the rest of it, I think we don't need to explain. I think you just make the best choice you can. It's not easy. What I'm saying is simple, but it's not easy. But you have to remind yourself that you don't owe that long tail of people who are judging you an explanation. You just put your best foot forward and you keep walking.
But what if it's yourself that's judging you, right? Like
And
how
you have to recognize that, right? And sometimes you feel sad. Do you feel good if you miss a big event? No, it's terrible and it hurts. And then you have to step back and acknowledge the big picture. What helps there is really like my husband. Like remember he said, Manisha, you are not here in District 2, right? So you cannot do all the things that they do. So stop trying. You be the best mother you can be. And so I didn't have that. Like some people have a lot of pressure from their partner to kind of, we don't have that. But so I didn't, that was a big support for me. I feel guilty. You always feel bad. Like you always want to do, even if you spend the whole day, then you're like, oh, well, I wish we had done something better. Do you know what I mean? Like that's our personality, and we need to acknowledge that and acknowledge that that's not always in our best interest.
How does Sonali feel about that?
I don't know. I think she is at the age where this is the mother that she has known, right? And sometimes I used to guilt out my mom. When she was young, because in our school, not many moms worked, and she didn't even work that many hours. She was back by 4, right? But not yet. I think she thinks working at Momo's cool. She likes the company. She likes to visit sometimes.
She knows your CFO. She knows what a CFO is.
She doesn't really. I mean, she knows that she doesn't know what that means, but she kind of understands what I do. She likes to visit, and so I think she's happy. What we do is like, Momo is about financial inclusion, right? It's about making payments. And so sometimes I'll explain to her what we do and how that's helpful. And she thinks that's cool. But of course, there will come a time when she gets angry that I missed something. And sometimes what did I miss? I missed something because I was traveling last year. I really try hard to, all those 200 events, Yeah. But I missed something and she was really sad. And so I asked so this is what I'm saying is like the other mom's help, right? Like a guy in her class, his mom went and spent time with her and took a video and sent it to me. And, and so that's why you need more than you. But yes, sometimes you want your parents there. You understand that they work, but you want them there and you're not there. And you cannot be at 2 places in one time. And that's hard. Yeah. I don't think it ever gets easier though.
Yeah, my children ask a lot about what I do, and for a lot of times they think that I'm on a computer because Kevin's also on the computer all the time. And we saw on the school app today that my younger one was pretending she was typing an email.
I'm mommy.
Yes, and so she was at work typing an email. So I see that. Definitely.
Sonali did that. She built a computer once during COVID because we were always on the computer, and she was like, keyboard, yes. "I'm mommy."
That's what I'm doing. So I feel like
it's better than being on the iPhone, right? So
true. Yes, but definitely what we do does influence the way they see what a mom should be doing, right? So I do see that it's a positive influence, that they know that they need to, that they can grow up to be something. They can be confident enough to want to be something.
Yeah, and that you can also do that and have a family. And then we have friends whose moms don't work, and they should be able to see multiple examples, right?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the skills that we want the children to learn, right? We had talked about, at a certain age, they need to start specializing, right? When they were younger, they had a lot of different activities. Let's do swimming. Let's do, all these different things. But I remember one time you said, well, at a certain age, they need to start competing, because that is a skill that you need to know, right? Can you talk about how do you think about what children should learn at what age, and how are you planning that?
Oh, we're not at I like that philosophy, and I espouse it, but so right now we are very much at the stage of doing a few things, right? So now the school gives the activities. But I see that, so we you need to do one sport, you need to do one non-physical activity, and then we probably want her to do some piano or something, right? And so that's the one that we ask her to do, and the rest is mostly her choice. So she's going to do some gymnastics, she's going to do drama class, but now she also really likes chess. So we're still at the stage where she's doing quite a few. But I agree that I don't know, it depends really on the child. If the child shows this deep passion, one of Sonali's best friends is a really good gymnast, and she does rhythmic gymnastics, and she does it like for 9-10 hours a week, and she's competing every month in different places. But her mom's not pushing her. She's like pushing her mom, right? And because it came from her. Sonali, our daughter is not necessarily at that stage, but in the next couple of years, the thing about the competition is about learning to try and to lose and then get up and try again, right? It's to build that resilience, I think.
Well, what about when you were younger, right? You mentioned you didn't want to be a CFO. Right,
Whoever dreams of being a CFO.
Probably are some
I didn't
people
even
just
know.
love numbers, right?
Well, no, sorry.
So what? How did your parents structure your childhood and all the activities that you did? Did they have a say in it, or did you kind of lead the way?
Yeah, it was sort of like pre-internet lifestyle, right? And there weren't so many options. So we had the things that we did at school. We had the interests that my parents, and my dad's a very good classical Indian music singer. So he really tried to make us, he forced us for a year or two, and then we just protested so much that he dropped it. So they exposed us to that. They exposed us to classical dance, and I said, "Oh no, I want to do Western dance, like jazz." So then my mom found a class to go for that. They did some sports, so we obviously did swimming, and at some point we played tennis. I did table tennis. I didn't like table tennis, but I liked tennis, so I got to do that. So they just kept, I think in a much more relaxed way than, because sometimes when my parents look at all of us, like it's not just me, definitely me, but like all the moms kind of in our generation, and they're like, they think that we're a little bit too much, like we push a lot of many things. And so every year there'd be like something new, and then you try it. And my sister was really a really good classical dancer, and she liked it, so she continued to do it. I had to literally be dragged to that dance class, and so they pulled me out of it. So right. Something like that. So I think it's the constant exposure, but it's not just exposing you to the class, right? But then you want to see what it can be. So we grew up watching like Wimbledon and the French Open, so we understood tennis. So then when we went on a court, it was like, oh, I can be like Steffi Graf, so it became, so you have to kind of show what it can be through exposure and then take them to try a few things.
Right. I remember growing up, my parents didn't do any of that, right? So anything that I wanted to do was because I saw my friends do it or something was introduced in school. And I remember thinking, or not then I was fine with it, but looking back, I just wonder, would I have done more? Would I have stuck with something for longer and then gotten better at it had there been some influence saying, no, you must do it?
So I know this was a discussion that I oftentimes had with my dad, and I'm like, why didn't you force me to pursue classical music?
You're the adult.
And
like,
my
I'm the
mom
child.
was like, I had to physically drag you into the class. And I'm like, but you should have forced me. You can always force a child. And my parents were like, we don't do that. You knew what you wanted, and we wanted to support you.
But isn't that I don't know if that's, because
my dad also told me you are a student and a student studies. Right, so it wasn't that they did it across the board, but is really singing well a life skill? Right. Can I do it now? Yeah. So I think they pick their battles, but they also we come from a Montessori family, so they really believe that the child knows what they like, and if you let them do what they like, they will prosper in it. I think that's very much like the underlying philosophy in my family. So we weren't forced. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I do see now to try to make my child do something she doesn't like. It's really hard. It's a huge source of conflict and stress in the child and stress in me. And you really have to think to what end is that going to achieve. And if they have this brilliant natural talent, then maybe. But my child's not Mozart, right? So I don't really need to push her in piano unless she shows it, but I think a little bit. You have to always balance it. And at some point, they get really angry. You see kids who are so cross with their parents, I think nothing is worth having a bad relationship with your child. I can be pretty strict. Like, there is no iPad in my house on the weekday. Like, it's just not happening, right? But on what they do in their free time, You have to a little bit let them choose and follow. That's what I feel, right?
So, to get to where you are, I imagine you had to have been very disciplined. And I think about myself, and I'm in my younger years was super disciplined. If I wanted something,
I think you're super disciplined now.
Well, I try now. I try, but I know for sure when I was younger, I would study for until midnight. I would work until midnight. That was if I wanted something, discipline, right? And I wonder, how did I learn that, right? And how do I teach my child that, right? So everything you're describing is the anti-discipline, right?
Oh, no.
Where they get to choose what they want, and you're not forcing them to do anything.
My parents were strict when they had to be. So I remember, like in India, you didn't have that much TV growing up. Like we had a couple of channels, and every Sunday evening there would be like one Hindi movie, and my parents didn't like some of those movies, and so I was not usually allowed to watch them. But sometimes I'd go watch with my aunt, and then my dad would stand at the side of the living room, and he'd be like, "Now come," he said, "you are a student studies." Not at the age of 8, at the age of 14, right? Like it's a difference, right? And so while there was this natural culture where education was important in our family and learning more than, so nobody was like, "Oh, well, you didn't get this grade." It was always like, "Well, did you try your best? And you have an exam. Are you ready? Your work is important. Do you understand? If you don't understand," they taught us. And they really had that skill. Not everyone has that skill or patience to teach a child. But at the same time, I remember there's this very famous phrase that my grandfather would like come and write on the blackboard in our room. It's like, I don't know if you know this. What's it? Let me see if I remember it. They who left their footprints in the sands of time, they, while their compatriots slept, were toiling deep into the night. And this phrase I have heard just an infinite number of times, generally repeated throughout my family growing up. Sometimes I say it to Sonali, she doesn't really understand. But so there was this, and they talked about their life experiences. My dad told me how hard he studied when he was in college and how hard they had to work when he moved to the US. And so working hard was just something that you kind of do. And you see your parents working hard. I saw my mom, she didn't work very hard. She worked at work, and then she came back and she worked really late at home to make sure that, all the food was on the table. If we wanted other things, she made them. Everything was ready. So we saw everybody in our lives work. Nobody was like sitting at 4 o'clock watching TV, right? So I think you see that and you do impress upon it. I think for me, never was academic. I like to learn. I was like a good reader. I loved history. But until like the 7th grade, which is like 13, and I wasn't like top 5 in the class or anything. I just did the schoolwork, went home and played tennis and just had a good time, right? At that point, my mom says, she doesn't do anything. And she said, I just kind of flipped the switch. I also saw my sister and my elder cousins and how they studied for their exams, right? So you could see people and you knew that this discipline and this studying was kind of needed, right? And I think she just said that I decided I wanted to study in the US, so I need to take my school seriously. And then I started to work hard. And
so do you remember when that flip switched for you?
No, I don't remember it. This is like what my parents tell me, because my mom said to me once, and she said, this other mother, like very active mother, came and said, "Oh, I see Manisha's grades are better. What are you doing? Like, are you doing like tuitions?" She said, "No, she just decided to start studying." And then because I wanted to, and then I think I cared, like from a competitive perspective, like I wanted to do well in school. I wanted to get continuously good grades, and I was willing to put in the effort. And I didn't love physics, so it wasn't a joy for me to study those subjects, but I knew that I sort of needed to get to the next level.
This kind of reminds me of the way I was brought up. My parents, or actually my mom, stopped asking for report cards after like the 5th grade.
Wow.
Yeah, I think she's just too busy. She didn't speak English, so she didn't really know what was going on anyway. So she never asked, and I just didn't bother to show her. But they were all A's.
Did they have to sign it?
No, I don't think so. I don't recall.
No
I never had to. No, I think I just took it home. Yeah, I don't remember.
My school was a very interactive school.
No, I went to public school, so maybe they didn't care. But I think because I didn't feel the pressure, I put the pressure on myself, right? Where you kind of realize if I'm here and I want to go there, and there's no pressure from the parents, then where's the pressure has to come from?
So I think that like, I was reading an Oprah interview from Oprah, and somebody was asking, this Trevor Noah was asking her, why you interviewed so many successful people, and why don't people get where they, like, why do some people succeed and others don't? And she said, the ones that succeed usually are the ones that know where they want to go. Mm-hmm. And so I knew I wanted to go to America to study, and I knew the only way that I could get there was to get a scholarship because my family couldn't pay the full amount. Mm-hmm. And so I knew I needed to get good grades, and I needed to do other things and to do them well. And then once you know where you want to go,
you can set the path.
You can just do it, right? And I was supported. It wasn't like people were asking me to do other things and not allowed to stay up late if you need to study. I think that, like, hopefully. But when did that happen for you? 5th, 6th grade, right? No, it didn't happen at the age of 7 or 8.
Yeah, you're right. It was 5th, 6th, 7th, yeah, 5th, 6th grade.
They need to cut your daughter some slack.
I know. I'm realizing as we discuss, I'm like thinking back to myself. No, it's true. Same thing. When I realized I wanted to go to college, and if I want to go, I need to get scholarships because my family can't afford it. And once you realize that, then, and again, like once you set that goal, now you know exactly what you need to do. And so you just go for it.
Yeah, and we were in schools where that was kind of supported, and we were in good home environments. And it's harder for your mom. She doesn't speak the language that it must have been really hard for her in the U.S.
Yeah, I'm sure it was hard for her, but I was a little kid in my own bubble.
Yes,
so trying to figure things out on my own now. I see now all that she did for me. But growing up, it was like, kind of swimming on my own when it came to school. But I realize now, yes, I think maybe like the child's brain needs time to develop, right? And at age 8, it's still developing.
That's exactly what my parents, like if I say like, it's like, why are you pushing her, right? Like she's having so much fun. Like our girls, like look at them, they like love to go to school. They're full of joy in their classes. Sonali did some swim class or some swim team trials. Did they have that? I was like, how was it? She's like, it was great. I came 2nd and 3rd. I'm like, okay, I don't know what's going on, but like, I don't think she's going to make the swim team because, those kids, like they train every day. But you know what? She tried. She had fun. It's okay.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I think that's the hard part is, I think as an Asian parent, you just patience and knowing when to start pushing. Right. And yeah, I think 8 years old is probably still a bit young. Maybe 12, 13.
Because it doesn't come back, Mm-hmm. Yeah. You don't get that time where you can just, as we know all too well, you don't get that time when you have the physical ability and you're just sort of free to have fun and learning fun, right? Our kids are not sitting in front of TV screens all day, so it's not coming back.
When I was younger, I used to think, oh, if only I could skip a grade, because that would demonstrate how smart I am to be able to skip a grade. I never skipped a grade, but I just thought it would be really great. But so now as a parent, one of my children is born in November, right? And so she could technically be pushed up a year or be pushed back a year. And we actually chose to hold her back, right? Because then she can have a little bit more time to mature, and then she can actually enjoy herself in class. So she'll always be one of the older children in class, but I feel like that's a better decision. Some parents want their kids to just move up and be faster. But I feel like slowing down is probably better. What do you think?
When you're 30, it doesn't matter whether you graduated 1 year earlier. It only matters, actually it doesn't really matter. Only if you're like in a race to get into college at a certain date. In fact, now I see so many people taking gap years. I think what's the rush? Like let her make friends, and if she knows everything, it could, Sonali, she teaches March, right? So she's definitely in the, I guess she's one of the younger ones in her class, right? And that she can't shift around. But I remember once thinking, I was like, oh, should I change her school? Because one of my friends changed schools so her daughter could go up 1 year. And I'm like, I think also because especially in the younger years, you're physically more, especially in the younger years, the physical capability of the child makes a big difference, and that really influences their confidence, right? And so,
and that kind of builds the foundation when you're a child.
Yeah. And so I think that that's
Speaking of the gap year, even for the older one, she's 8, but we're already planning a gap year for her.
well,
Right,
well,
so-
why don't you wait and see what she wants to do? Maybe she wants to go straight to college.
Well, I kind of feel like we should introduce the concept to her, right? Because I think, I know, but you have to start young, right? Well, I feel like, okay, so concepts that are foreign to society, like a gap year, right? Because I think in the US, it's only beginning to be somewhat normal, but for the most part, people go straight high school to college. And I feel like some people judge that as saying, oh, this person's not smart enough, or this person isn't trying hard enough.
Especially in Asia, yeah.
Yeah, and even for myself before, I would say, well, why would you do that? You're wasting time, right? But I kind of feel like now that I'm older and I can see life better, I kind of want her to take that year to explore life and to learn new things. And so introducing the concept now will make it seem like it's not like mommy saying you're stupid or lazy. Mommy is saying that there's more to life, right?
But no, I think that that's not an unfair point, right? It was just, for me, I've had a few friends. One of my closest friends, both her kids ended up taking a gap year. So it's already like something that it's not foreign to us, because so many people that we know have done it. And I feel like it's becoming more and more common nowadays. But yeah, makes sense. And I think that it doesn't come back, right? Like when I finished, I did college in 4 years. I could have done it half year earlier. But instead, like I went on a study abroad to Russia, and certainly now nobody's going to Russia for 6 months, right? So you have those experiences and you build that kind of exposure, and you don't get those chances again.
I did the same thing. College, 4 years, I could have finished in 3.5.
Yeah.
My last half year, I took like 4 credits. Like college in the US is 16 credits, right?
okay.
I took 4 credits. So I took 1/4 of what I'm supposed to do. And the rest of the time I worked, but then I also just hung out and watched TV with friends, and I got a chance to just be a kid. Yeah. So
I think that if you're lucky, because you and I were, other people, like, we had a scholarship, so actually they were like paying us to be in school, so why would you not, right? But other people aren't so lucky, and then they have to, like, my husband started like every summer he worked from the age of 13, right? And so not everyone has that, and if you're lucky enough to have the opportunity, you should take it.
Oh, I still worked, right? So they paid for school, but there's still housing and everything else you have to work for. So it was juggling work and school and trying to enjoy your life
Pretty
as a
exhausting, right? You kind of need a break before you go into the real world.
So I want to talk to you about one thing that all parents have to think about, which is when children make mistakes, right? And they always make mistakes, right? Big, small, all the time. And I feel like how they can manage stress and manage issues in life kind of comes from the parent's message when they do something wrong as a child, right? So what do you think? Like how do you react when Sonali does something wrong, or she doesn't achieve a certain score on something, or she doesn't win? Like how do you help her cope with it, and how do you react?
So on the winnings, I don't care about that. I mean, she's too young, and usually if she doesn't achieve something, I'm mostly worried at this point about how she's feeling about it, as opposed to I have no ambition for her at age 8. So she just does her best and she feels good about it, and then I'm happy. I sometimes think about how I react, and I realize my reaction is linked to not just what she does. Like if she makes a mistake, like she drops water, just as you're ready to step out of the house, then the reaction, because you're like missing a time, right? Then it becomes kind of more irritated than if you just dropped water and we were just sitting around and doing nothing, right? So I think that that's something that we all should be, that I get increasingly cognizant of, is that the time pressure is what creates a lot of stress for parents. I don't know. I like to say that there are certain things that are not okay, like being disrespectful. Like if we agreed that you would do something, like I would get angry if I see her using the iPad when she promised that she doesn't use it, and then I would take it away. And not being ready on time. Those are more like usually at her age, it's more about the little things.
But what about like the big things, right? Because you think about as they get older and they don't have enough points to achieve, to get into a certain school, or they get a bad grade on a test. You don't want to be afraid to tell you, right? No. Because as parents, you want them to feel like you're always there for them. You're their foundation. Yeah. But now if they're afraid to come to you.
Yeah, no, I think that's, to me, that's foundational, right? We were talking about my parents. It's one thing loving or liking your parents. It's another, knowing that their home is always your home, and that no matter how much, at least for me, right? I did well in life because I feel like I move on the front foot, right? I come from with this love behind me, and I try to do what I do, and sometimes I mess up spectacularly, sometimes I make stupid mistakes, but they're still there. And I always grew up and knowing that no matter how either like badly I did or how if I behaved badly, like sometimes doing badly on a test that you tried your best for really isn't your fault, right? So I can tell you, I told you before, right? My parents only ever asked me, did you try your best? And I really struggled with like foreign languages. And so they'd be like, well, what can we do to make it better? Mm. And sometimes they'd be like, you need to study to be better, right? But it was never. So when I got into trouble, my dad's usual reaction, then, you get into trouble, you get caught, and then you cry. And then my dad would be like, okay, now you understand, so next time do better. And that is genius. So you try that with your child. So once, and I did that, something about not getting ready on time or not brushing your teeth on really not important things, right? And I'm like, you told you the third time, and and then she's like, I'm really sorry. I'm like, okay, next time do better. She's like, no, punish me. It's kind of easier to get punished, right? Because if you say something would do better, it means you gotta kind of do better. Like they love me, they forgive me, and I have to do better. So I think
you're putting the guilt back on them.
Not on purpose, because what can you do, right? You make a mistake. Like we make mistakes, you make it, I make it all the time. And I want to do better, right? And I think she's trying the same. And so if I punish her, it's not going to get her to do better. Like, okay, if you were out all night and you didn't study for an exam, definitely putting curfew on, right? And you have to study. But in a normal course of events, I think that if you ask them to do better, eventually it does work, but not immediately. It's like it takes longer to seep in, but it does work. And I'm not kidding you, like even if I was rude to my parents and I apologize, my parents would be like, okay, don't do it again next time. Mm-hmm. It was never, when we were young, parenting is constant and frustrating sometimes, right? So of course you lose your temper, but broadly that was one. And then the other thing is when I get angry, and I will say to her at some point in that conversation, like, mommy and papi are really angry, doesn't mean we don't love you, right? I can love you and be mad at you at the same time.
Remind them that you'll always love them.
And you can always tell me anything. And that comment is said to her so many times at night before they sleep. And sometimes if you apologize, you feel like the tension come out of their body. Their life's going to be hard, right? And you want them, when they make the big things, right? They're so young right now, but like, I don't know, they really fail out of university, or for want of trying, or even because they did bad, like they made poor choices, or they lose a job, right? Like the bigger things in life that at least they should call us, right? Like at least we can be there for them and help them through that terrible phase, because we both know kids who like collapse when they do badly in an exam because they're so scared that their mom or dad will get angry. What is that? It doesn't motivate you to, it does motivate you to do better, like you read Andre Agassi's biography or something, but it really kills something inside you, right? And I don't want that for my child. She doesn't have to go to the best college.
Yeah, I think, I feel bad. So when my daughters make a mistake, I lose my temper, I yell at them, and then I feel bad. So what I started doing now is afterward, I come back and apologize,
I do that too.
right? And I
All the
say,
time.
yeah, I said, that was a mistake. You shouldn't have done that. Don't do it again. Learn from it. And I'm sorry that I yelled at you.
Mommy shouldn't have screamed.
Yeah, mommy
right?
should not
Yeah.
have yelled at you.
Yeah, I do it all the time. But that's all you can do, really, right?
But I think that helps them understand that people have emotions, and sometimes you lose control of your emotions, but you need to take responsibility for them.
Yeah, and and also acknowledge them, right? Like, try not to react, but like, you feel sad, it's okay to cry. You feel disappointed, it's okay.
Yeah.
And then you find your path out of it. But if you ignore it and you keep it inside and it just builds and builds and builds, then you explode, right?
Yeah, and I think it's important to have them feel like they're people too, right? Because a lot of times I feel like children feel so disempowered, right? Like the parents tell them what to do and you just speak down to them. But if you apologize to them now you're elevating them to your level, right? And then that gives them the confidence to go out and say, no, I'm your equal. I'm everybody's equal.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, that's true.
So I feel like we talked a lot from like baby all the way on up to college plans, right?
Okay.
And through all of that, one of the things I always think about is things that are painful but worth it. So in all of that, what's been a really painful moment for you, or what do you think is super painful about being a mom? And is it worth it?
I think it's worth it. But I think, again, our kids are so young, and touch wood, they've never been sick. We've not had those terrible, life events. And so I think the hardest thing is the constancy of it especially when they are really young. And I remember when Sonali was really young and my husband was traveling and, we didn't have any family, and the nanny'd go, like when I came back from work at 5 or 6, she'd be gone, right? And then, that time where like don't wash your hair because the child is crying and you're just waiting for them to stop, right? I think that's what it is, right? And even in the early years, then they go to 6 months and they're always like in danger of killing themselves by mistake. And so you have to be so constantly watchful. Yes. I remember when we went to the States this year, there was me and then and I didn't have to, she was on her own on that flight. And compared to a few years ago, I was me, I was carrying her, carrying the stroller, had a backpack of our things. Yeah. And it's really hard. And you don't get 5 minutes on your own. I think that's for me,
constancy, never stopping.
It just doesn't stop, right? I think that becomes real hard for people. And, if you're like an only mom, and, one of my friends once said, like, oh, you must be so happy, you have a baby or a maternity leave, like 6 months, because it was Europe. She's like, yeah, Manisha, but it gets really lonely. And I was like, well, what do you mean you have your baby? How can you be lonely? She said, it doesn't talk to you. It's in those early days, it's all one-way communication. They might smile, but it's not really, now it's fun, right? Now it can be fun, but in the early years, it can be really isolating, I think, for a young mom, because you're so involved in just the child and you, and apart, I think, from everywhere else.
Yeah, I had a business partner who had a child, and we talked, and then time passes by, and we have to talk again, and I'm like, oh, how long has it been? And he's like, oh yeah, it's like, my son's about 18 months. I'm like, 18 months? I mean, like almost 2 years? Time just flew by. And the look on his face, right? It was like, it flew by for you, but not for me.
You know what somebody once said? They said that the days are really long, but the years go by quick.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Every day is so painful. It gets to a point where you're so tired.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, 8 years have gone by. Yeah, and like another double that, and she's going to college soon, and I'm losing my daughter.
We can go with, right?
Yes, we're following them. Okay, well, I feel like to be able to have such a great relationship with your daughter, it starts with a good relationship with your husband. Let's talk about Andrea. Okay. How did you guys meet?
We met in Chennai. We were both working.
Chennai is in India.
It's in the south of India, and I think he was there to build his company's factory, and I was there for a job because I wanted some India experience. And neither of us, it's not my city, so I didn't know anyone. I didn't even speak the local language. And so there was this networking group, right? And that's how we met.
And love at first sight, or did it take some time to get to know each other?
But pretty quick. Pretty quick.
Okay, so you knew.
I mean, he knew first, but yeah, I think it was maybe a couple of months before we started dating.
Oh, before you started dating. And then how long before you got married?
Oh, I think we met in 2000, like almost 2 years.
Okay,
Year and a half.
that's not that long. Yeah, it's about how
It's
long?
very long if you're Italian. It's very short if you're Italian. Yeah, for Indians it's not long. I mean, it's on the longer side for some, right? But we weren't that young, right? I was in my late 30s. I was 36 or something like that.
I think, yeah, I was 35 when I got married. I think by that age you kind of know what you want, but more importantly, you know what you don't want.
Yes.
Right. So if they're within the universe of what you want, then let's do it.
Yes.
Yeah. So he was okay with it, or did you kind of have to nudge him a bit?
For me, it was important to get married. For him, it was important to be in a committed relationship. So he was much keener to like move in together, to do those things. But for him, like marriage was just unnecessary. It wasn't that he wanted to play the field or anything. He was very keen to be in a committed relationship. But the wedding wasn't a big part of that. Marriage is different, right? The wedding wasn't an important part for him. And so but I was very early on, I said, I don't just date to date, like I date because I look for a serious relationship. And for me, that means marriage.
Yeah, I think for Kevin and me, he basically moved into my apartment when he moved to Vietnam.
Yeah.
And so that was only maybe like 2 or 3 months after we started dating, right? So we were very close very quickly. We said, I love you like the second week, so we kind of always knew. But then 2 years later, I'm sitting there, I'm like, no ring, hello. Right.
But did you tell him that?
Yes.
But did you have the conversation
I
that
had
marriage
to tell
is?
him.
But did you have
Yes.
the conversation that marriage? I told Andre that not only is marriage important to me, that for me it's important that you ask my dad for permission, because that's a very like American thing, right? They don't do that necessarily. It's not like their tradition, right? So they don't necessarily do it.
Yeah. So I told him, I'm waiting around, I'm losing patience. So I essentially just said, dude, do it, or why are we together? Right? And of course he did it, and one knee, everything. So now, things are good. But, I kind of feel like sometimes as a woman, if you know what you want, you can't be shy about it. Right? So did you have to like nudge him? I mean, he already knew, but were you finally at the point where you're like, I need you to do it within the next 2 months?
No, I wasn't that far along.
Okay.
But it was important to me, and he knew that. And I told him that. Because we also the city that we lived in is a pretty conservative city. It's not Saigon, it's not Bombay, right? And there are people, and I worked in a very conservative family group, right? And so it already was crazy that I wore jeans to work, right? So it was like, and so it was there was more like social pressure there than if we were here. I think maybe I would have been less. I would have maybe waited 2 years if we were here. But there it was just sort of, it seemed to me the right thing to do.
Okay. So when you met, you had a career. When you got married, you had your own career. What made you decide to come to Vietnam? Was it him or his or your job?
Yeah, so we'd been, I think, in Chennai almost six years or something. And we knew that wasn't where we wanted to live the rest of our lives. And what we thought would be really cool is, because he's Italian, I'm Indian American, let's go as a family, and we had Sonali, let's go to another place that neither of us know, which is an adventure for all of us. So we sort of explore. Otherwise, you're going to it's someone's home culture, right? So let's go somewhere which is foreign and
Make it fair.
Yeah. And no, do not make it fair, just be more fun, right? Eventually you might end up in Italy or America or India, but for this, let's just have this, because we're not going to do it when she's in high school and it becomes hard to move.
Yeah.
And my job was a very local job, just like my Momo job is, right? And his job, their company has many different plants all over the world, so he looked internally and he had a few options, and Vietnam was one of them, and said okay.
So you were okay leaving your job and coming to Vietnam with no job?
Because I felt like my job had kind of run its course. There was no continued. I'd be kind of doing the same thing, and it wasn't that much fun anymore. And so I was okay to take a break. I thought that I would take a longer break. I thought that I did take a break, but I thought the plan was for the first year or so, at least I don't work. And we just make sure that our daughter transitions smoothly and she's happy and we're settled in well and we have some friends and we have that it becomes our home. And yeah, but it kind of turned out differently.
So he supports you in having a
Yeah,
career?
I think for him it was more than me. For him, it was important that I have a job after Sonali was born. Like before she was born, we talked about it, and he said, "I think you should work. Like you should be your person, even after not for the money, just because it was so much a part of my identity that that he felt it was important that I had that identity even after." So he was very supportive.
With your role at work, you're CFO. So you manage all the finances, all the risk management. You're also head of HR, so you manage everything. What about at home? Who does the finances at home?
So, I was watching an interview with two CFOs and who does the accounts. They outsource it. So, very often people who work in finance, and this is in part because when you work in a bank, you can't actually invest anything, right? So you never do anything and you don't have any time to do anything. So I wasn't very good at it, and I think we both sort of look after parts of, because of like where we've lived and worked, we have maybe assets in like Italy and India and America and Vietnam. So we both look after parts of it. We both share all the information. We make investment decisions broadly together, unless it's very small and nobody cares. So we kind of do that together on the daily stuff. Because I was at home and I work much more closely with the nanny, so I do more like the household. It's not much, right? It's like buy milk, buy whatever, like this class, that class, So that part I do. The bigger picture is very much together. And if anything, Andrea is very disciplined. He's kind of like you, right? Like so, when it has to be done, he'll have done it, and he'd be like, oh well, did you update this file? Did you, I don't know, the market crashed? Did you think about investing? So he's just much more like disciplined about it than me.
It's funny you say that because most people would think that I'm the one to control the finances in the family, but
Kevin do it, right?
Yeah, Kevin does
the
it.
number of people in finance who want nothing to do with finance
I just
at
don't
home.
want to deal with it.
Yes.
Right? I'm just too lazy. I have so many other things to do, and it's just so mundane, right? Yeah, it's not fun. So now so you keep everything transparent.
Yeah.
Both sides knows everything. But what if there's a disagreement?
Like what kind of?
Like if you don't agree on how to invest, or if there's a big purchase he wants to buy a whole new sports car, and you're thinking, why do we need this car?
Yeah, I think on the big thing, if we don't both agree, it's not going to happen, right? Like
no person has veto rights.
It's not like you discuss veto rights, but I would never say like I want to buy an expensive piece of jewelry, right? There's nothing else, and Andrea says no. I would wait 6 months. I would ask again.
Okay.
I would ask again, right? And I would hope that with that car, he would do we've not had the situation,
right.
But I think that we would not do something big without the consent. Because the way I think of it, and I think that the way we think about this, it's a shared asset, right? So if you're going to use it in a large way, then you do need to get agreement to both, because otherwise what happens, right? It's at such a dangerous precedent.
Yeah.
And you really need to think about how badly you want that piece of jewelry or that sports car to create a dangerous pattern. So I think that for something big, we wouldn't do it. For investments, if they're small, so we disagree, do it. If it's a big amount of money, then no. But if it's a small amount of money, yes. And usually if you disagree, then be like, okay, let's look at it again. What's your concern? So you have to talk about so you're worried about these 3 things. Okay, let me go back and cross-check on these things. Let's talk to somebody else about it. Let's see what they say, and let's verify whether those concerns are valid or not. And then you make a decision together. But if it's small and you want to invest in some startup that I don't like, go for it, right?
Yeah, I think for Kevin and me, our spending habits kind of set a precedent over time.
Yeah, okay.
They generally do, but he loves electronics. So if he could have it his way, he'd buy a new phone every year. But for me, I keep my phone at least 2 to 3 years. I keep my computer at least 5 years. Yeah, exactly. So I think I set a precedent. So now I think he feels bad. So he also waits 2 to 3 years to buy a phone. So I feel like if you both have similar spending habits, it makes it much easier.
And over time, you come to that, don't you? But the other thing is, right, like in the beginning, what tends to happen is you really put like judgment on the people's preferences, right? And that's where so like, I like an expensive cocktail. Andrea thinks it's like ludicrous to spend $10 or $15 on a cocktail. He just won't do it, right? But maybe he likes to buy like, I don't know actually, like, like to stay in nicer hotels than I would, right? And then you just have to kind of understand that we need to find a solution that can support kind of both those habits, right? I think that the fight comes when you judge your partner's choice. So you're such like Kevin, like you buy a phone every year, like that's so showy. Who does that? That's so wasteful. And then that's a different conversation. It's not about the cash. It's a value judgment.
It's values, yes. So I think that's the thing is you have to understand the underlying values that's pushing this decision, right? Because it's not about being flashy and having a new phone.
It's just about having the latest technology.
No, it's about speed. He doesn't want to wait 1 millisecond for anything. Push must happen, right? And then for me, my 5-year-old computer, my team will know, it makes shh, it's like so loud, and then you press a button and you wait like 5 seconds for it to happen. But I'm like, 5 seconds, I'll just talk to you. It's not a big deal, right? 5 seconds, I'll wait, right? Exactly, right? So it's a value thing. I don't value those 5 seconds on the computer because I have other things I can be doing, but for him, he wants it super fast, right? So initially, I kept telling him, I don't need a new phone. I don't care who sees my phone. But once you discuss deeper, it's not about what model you're holding. It's about how much efficient you are with your time. Right? And so after we understood that, then for me, I'm like, well, then I need the most expensive one. Because I need memory.
For 10 years,
No, I need memory space. Like I value a lot of memory space. I save everything. I'm a pack rat, right? So I want to save everything. So it's not, but for him, it's like you just want a fast processor. Never mind the memory, right? But I'm like, screw the processor. I just want more memory, right? So that's the issue when we start buying electronics or with anything else. You realize you have to understand like the reason why that person wants something.
When Andrea buys something, it's always like has to be like really good. I'm like, I'm okay if it's chipped on the side. He's like, no compromise when you want to buy something. Buy. Like if you really want to buy something, then you stop worrying about the price. You find the perfect thing, and then you keep it in that perfect condition for a long time, right?
Keep the plastic on.
No, not that bad. But when you use it, you take care of it, right? And then you clean it. Like if it's shoes or something, you clean it and you keep it. Keep it well.
So you guys chose Vietnam because you thought it would be an adventure for the whole family, something new for both you and Andrea, and so you would both be learning together. I'm sure there's a lot of culture shock when you first got here. Can you share some of those experiences?
One of my favorite stories, and anytime somebody comes to meet me, like who's not Vietnamese, around lunchtime, I remember my first day at work, right? The rest of the world, people don't take a nap at work. So I came and suddenly the lights go out and then everyone starts. No, at Momo they put the steel, like those, they have like a mattress. Everybody was sleeping and I was walking over sleeping people. But that was really that really surprised me.
I thought they take naps in India. No? No naps
Not
in India?
at their desk, no.
Oh, okay. So where do you sleep? Like if you have an office job,
you don't take naps.
You don't take naps in the office?
No, I think it's like an exclusively Vietnamese thing. You don't even usually sleep at school like they do here.
It's been a while, right? How long have you been?
It's been 6 years.
Okay. So you may have forgotten a lot of the shock.
Yes, I think so. I just feel like if you come from India and you know a little bit Asian culture, the shock of Vietnam is much more subtle, right? There's just people eat a lot more like meat here than they do in India. So you go to Ben Thanh market or any sort of wet market, it's kind of really hard when you're you're not vegetarian, but like you've never bought meat in a wet market. So the wet markets are always something that you have to get used to. And now we are used to it, but that was always a surprise. But mostly, like, I think people were more welcoming and more open. I was a bit worried. I'm like, oh, we're Indian American. They're all gonna hate Americans. And actually, you know, America has not moved on, but Vietnam has moved on, right? Like they focus on their future, and they like some things about America. They don't like some things about America. They certainly don't like the role of those countries in the war. But I was just always really, I think that's what surprised me. And it's not like a culture shock as to how like entrepreneurial and sort of forward-looking people were here. I didn't expect that. I expected them to be, you know, less, like more
Traditional?
not traditional per se, but more like caught in their past. I feel like when I look at, you know, Momo, the average age is 27. And so a lot of what I see is the people that I see there. And that's really, Thao Dien is not a Vietnamese interaction, right? But Momo is. And when I see the younger people, they're just sort of, you know, they're very forward focused. They want to do better in life, and they like things from different cultures. They are very patriotic, but they're also open to new ideas, and they're just so open to the new ideas. And that, I think, more than anything surprised me. I didn't think it would be that way. Because I always think of like Vietnam's not East Asian, but like Southeast Asian. I always think of them as more inward looking. It wasn't.
So we've talked a lot today, right? We've talked a lot about kids, husbands, adventures in life. And I kind of feel like your general philosophy is let the kids be, right? Like let them try to make their own decisions. Don't pressure them too much. Am I getting that right, or is there something more to it?
Yeah, I wish it was more like that. No, I think that I try very hard to move in that direction, right? And I want to follow her more than lead her in her directions in life. Obviously, there are a set of values, and you need to, your times tables and all those things. But there's a part of me that would schedule every minute of my daughter's life, and there is that tiger mom side, and I try very hard. And so instead of trying to grow that side, I try, especially this year, I'm trying very hard to pull back on that and let her be her. But be quite an active guide is where I'm trying to go directionally.
Active guide.
Active
I like
guide.
that. Well, thank you for your sharing today. We really appreciate your time.
And you too. Thank you.
Yes. And thank you everyone for watching today. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Nếu bạn có bất kỳ khách mời nào mà bạn muốn nghe câu chuyện của họ, hoặc có câu hỏi gì cho chương trình, hãy để bình luận bên dưới. Đừng quên đăng ký kênh YouTube Linh Thái Official và kênh Yan News để không bỏ lỡ các tập tiếp theo nha.